Hey, what's up guys? Brad with the Squared Away Everyday channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting topic, which is steel versus aluminum bumpers. And we'll kind of just hit the high points of steel versus aluminum in general when we're talking bumpers, the overall methodology of it, my personal preference on it, and then we'll talk about front versus rear bumpers and all that kind of good stuff. So hopefully this is going to be a fairly quick video, just a quick and dirty video. I'm not going to do a ton of B-roll or just quick edits or anything like that. I just don't have time for it this time of year. So anyway, steel versus aluminum bumpers, let's hop into it. If you haven't had a chance yet, please go ahead and like the video if you dig it, sub to the channel, and let's take a look. Okay, now when we're talking about steel versus aluminum as a material for a bumper, the pros and cons are very obvious. Steel is going to be a more robust, rugged, impact-resistant material, but on the downside, it's going to be a heavier material. Whereas we're talking aluminum, it's going to be lighter weight, that's its biggest pro, and then the con is going to be that it's not as durable, it's a more porous material, and if you're sliding off of rocks and stuff like that, the material is not going to last as long. Now also, in conjunction with those, aluminum's not going to rust. So as you scrape that bumper or scrape your, whatever you're using the aluminum for, you're not going to rust that material out, whereas steel will rust if you don't have any sort of paint protection on it or clear coat or anything like that. The steel will rust. So there's kind of just the general macro view on the pros and cons of steel versus aluminum in general for your bumper. Now, some people worry about hitting their bumper, if they have aluminum, hitting their bumper and getting hung up on rocks and trees and stuff like that. If you have any sort of momentum on your vehicle, I'm not going to say that you're going to get hung up on a rock or a tree or a stump or anything like that. Now, the material that gets removed during that impact or that scrape is going to be greater than steel, and so they're just not going to last as long and they're not going to provide as much protection, but they are a more porous material. And so if you hit something with steel versus hitting it with aluminum, the steel is going to scrape or slide over that material easier than aluminum is. Now, is that the biggest deal to me? No, it's certainly not. Really, what the biggest deal is when you're talking about choosing your material for your bumper is going to be the priority of use for that particular bumper for you. So if you're getting the particular bumper, let's say ground clearance is your biggest priority, well, does it matter if it's steel or aluminum? It probably doesn't. If you're just trying to mount lights and winches and maybe a CB antenna or stuff like that to the front or the rear, it's not really going to be that big of a deal whether you choose steel or aluminum. So the question really comes down to how much do you prioritize impacts and impact resistance into your bumpers. So for me personally, when I'm choosing a front bumper, I'm always going to want to run steel. Regardless of if I'm running a little V6 like this or I'm doing a diesel, I'm always going to run a steel bumper on the front, and I'm going to do a full bar. And that's because when we're overlanding or camping or just driving in rural areas at all, the likelihood of you having cell service goes down. And if you don't have a ham radio, a sat phone, something like that, some sort of satellite communicator, the priority for you to return from your adventures or just your errands or your trip that you're doing in that rural area goes way up. So for me personally, I'm always going to run a full front bar on the Tacomas, or not the Tacomas, on any sort of off-road or rural rig that I'm running. I'm going to do a full bar on that bumper, and it's going to be steel. And that's because I'm trying to prioritize protecting the engine and everything under the hood in the case that I have impact to the front, whatever that may be. It may be an animal strike, it may be a tree, it may be I slide off the road into something, and I really want to protect the front end of the vehicle so that I can continue my journey to wherever I'm going. So that's my highest priority when I'm picking a front bumper. Now, when I'm choosing a rear bumper, it's all utility based, right? That's all a utility. But when I'm choosing the rear bumper, that is more so for functionality. When I'm doing the rear bumper, I'm looking at mounting a spare tire, max tracks, a trasharoo, scene lighting, maybe a rear winch, stuff like that. We're doing maybe dual swing out arms, and we've got tables. And so when you're talking about steel versus aluminum, for those aspects, Is it really that important if you have steel versus aluminum? Not really, so we might as well save weight. And weight is a big concern, especially when you're talking about these little V6 engines. If you're running a like a diesel, like a real diesel, like a 6-liter Cummins or something like that, okay, great. Go ahead and run steel in the front and steel in the rear, because it's not going to make too big of a difference either way. But when we're running steel versus aluminum on a V6 or even a V8, that 60 or 80 pounds, when you compound that over your entire build, everywhere where you can save weight is going to make a big, big difference. For me, something I will not compromise on is a steel front with full bars, trying to protect the front of that vehicle. So really, that's kind of what it comes down to, is impact resistance. How high of a priority is that to you and your build? And if you were to ask me, I would say it should be pretty high. I think that's it. I think that's all I really need to say about steel versus aluminum bumpers. In the front, I run steel with full hoops, and in the rear, I'm running aluminum, and that's just to save weight. Now, if we're talking about skids and sliders, I'm also going to be running steel, because the likelihood of me hitting those is going to be very high. And also, it goes back to mobility. I need to make sure that the actual vehicle is mobile, even if we have a significant scrape underneath or any of that business. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you liked the video, please go ahead and give me a like, sub to the channel. This isn't a very flashy video with a ton of B-roll or anything like that, but I hope it was informative for you. We will see you in the next one.